Namaste. Thank you for joining me. This is the Almost Daily Zencat. I am your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. This podcast segment series, indeed the entire project, is made possible by generous support through Patreon.com. I almost said PayPal, although I do take donations vis-a-vis PayPal. Those who don't want to subscribe, you're welcome to give a one-time donation. Inbox me. Let's get started. As always, a quick thank you and shout out to freemusicarchive.org and to the individual artists whose music appealed to me, and I hope others as well, and that I'm using for these podcast series. Thank you for remote collaboration or disconnected collaboration. I appreciate your work. What are we going to talk about in today's episode? What did I even put in the episode description? Oh, yeah. There's an old saying. It's all in your mind. Therefore, why not change your mind? I like to extend that idea, or rather, that statement, I suppose. You can change your mind, or you can liberate yourself from that which you call yourself, that which you call your mind. It's easy to dismiss the sort of things that I discuss or that I would like to be discussing with others on these shows. I'm sure that I have not been called hippie new age whack job for the last time. I'm sure as more people tune in to check out the podcast, just because of sheer curiosity, more trolls will be attracted. Call me crazy, but I think that one of the most important concepts that we need to correct with clarity of direct understanding that is preventing us from gaining that larger perspective onto what's going on in terms of everyday life and everyday people out there. And that's the following. That this place is not a place. And that this place is living consciousness. This idea is easy to reject at first because it sounds cuckoo. You mean to say that the moon is a living thing and aware of itself? Not in that individuated way that we enjoy as talking avatars, but in the sense that the entirety of it is one entity and not a disparate collection of things found at different places. I'd like to point you, dear listener, to one of my earliest memes. If you have found me on Instagram, you can scroll down all the way to the beginning. It's kind of arduous. Especially, don't do it if you're not near Wi-Fi. Do it near Wi-Fi. By all means, do it near public Wi-Fi. I want my images to be discovered by others, and that's one of the ways that the internet kind of helps virally share stuff. Way deep down at the very beginning of my Instagram account, there's an image that, and I paraphrase because I haven't pulled it up. It basically says, now I feel like I ought to read it word for word. Of course, that'll take forever. It is a bit of effort. I know why not many people scroll down at the very beginning of my Instagram account, because I've been posting for a long time and there's a lot of images there. That's why I sometimes decide, instead of trying to seduce people to really look all the way at the very beginning, I just do the tedious work of scrolling down to that spot myself, and then share them or repost them or whatnot. I wish Instagram had a way to, hey, if you're listening, Instagram, I wish you had a way for me to, within your app, share at the top of my feed something that's deep down in my feed, which you don't. I can copy the link, but then if I use that in Instagram, then all that my users or followers see is a link. And I still got to put an image there. I want to be able to go, oh, I love this image that I quoted from Nuke Neater Narrate, whoever that is. That's there has to be a revolution of the mind before a revolution can play out in the streets, as Bob Marley, I do believe, was reminding us. That image macro doesn't have his name, citing the quotation to himself. But I posted that, I quoted that. I didn't create that image. I was quoting someone else's posting of it on July 31st, 2016. So almost a year ago. I missed it on the Facebook, a year ago, you posted this thing. So I wanted to repost it on Instagram. But there's no fun way to do that. No easy, simple, bloop, right at the top. So if you're listening Instagram, folks, I'm sure it wouldn't be that hard to create. Still scrolling. Oh, for those of you who are listening and have never visited my account, there's a little cluster of memes I made quoting a gentleman by the name of Thomas Lindsay. And this is one of those things that just gets under the skin of a bunch of different types of people. For example, I popped it open just to read his name, but here's one of the ones that I quoted this off a documentary that I saw. So this is an image that I didn't make the image. This is a macro that I made, a would-be meme. The U.S. Constitution is not a particularly democratic document. When people extol the Constitution, they extol the Bill of Rights. It's what they know. It's what we're proud of. But when you actually read the text of the Constitution, it's got some awfully anti-democratic stuff there. Thomas Lindsay. That's a statement that just rubs Democrats and Republicans the wrong way. Anybody that's still trying to figure out a way to maintain a statism mentality and just, fight the right party to fight with or for. I'll read another one of his. Totally didn't intend, but I saw them and I'm like, oh, God, these are great. People need to hear these. And I'll figure out a way. I guess the easiest way is to screenshot them and then recrop them, which is annoying. The Founding Fathers were not big fans of democracy. They wanted to make sure that mob could not rule. They wanted to make sure that the majority could not necessarily make the rules. It's ingrained in the constitutional text. It's not just us saying this. Many legal scholars have said the U.S. Constitution is one of the least democratic governing documents on the planet. The Constitution, this is all quote from Thomas Lindsay, the Constitution puts rights of property and commerce above the rights of people, communities, and nature. When you look at the constitutional construct, this is what it does. Why is that pertinent to what I open with? Well, we're all arguing about environment and how to fix it, right? Well, one of the things being ignored by both sides on this fight, because the big dog whistle distraction merry-go-round is whether or not it's real. So we're spending a lot of energy on both fronts. People in both camps are spending a lot of energy on that front, debating just the veracity of it as a statement. But you know that there's something to it once you dig deeper than just whether or not we think it's true, because you'll note that the party that sort of pretends to insist that it's not true is the party that's way more deeper aligned with the most toxic corporations. And yet the party that does sort of concede that it is true still sort of works around makes concessions for the same set of corporations. Why is that? Thomas Lindsay has a really interesting statement that might answer that question. The environmental regulatory regime is not about stopping anything at all. So the dreaded EPA, vilified by the GOP, turned, demagogic hero by the DNC, is not about stopping anything at all. And that was my interjection to his quote. I resume his quote. They are not called, quote-unquote, permits for nothing, says Thomas Lindsay. They are, and by they he means the state, regardless of party, they are permitting what would otherwise be an illegal activity through the state. That's what permits are all about. That's what the state process is all about. I'm going to stick with this jam. I'm going to read all of his quotes. The permit that's been granted to the corporation has been issued under permit guidelines that in most cases were written by the very same corporations that the regulations are ostensibly supposed to permit and regulate. What does that mean? The corporations, they write the regulations. If we think that there's anything in there that they've written that we can use to actually stop them from doing what they were planning to do in the first place when they wrote the regulations, we are insane. It is the definition of insanity. But that's what our activism has been about for the past 40 years. I'm going to interject here. We've been activists about the environment for longer than my lifetime. I'm 41, approaching 42, right? So even longer than the last 40 years. I would argue since whenever the very first demonstrations or protests erupted in the late 50s, early 60s about the environment. I guess that, I'm 41, I was born in 76, so round it up to 55, 60 years that we've been having this debate. Corporations can not only sue your community to overturn any law that you have adopted, but they can also sue your community for any future lost profits as part of the Fifth Amendment construct. Now, the Fifth Amendment is much older than 60 years old. But just in our living history, this generation of trying to fight for our natural rights in defense of that which we call nature, that which we dehumanize, because it is an entity, but we've been working these activisms. This is how Thomas Lindsay describes that activism effort. Mind you, I'm not trying to hate on anybody that's an activist, all right? Your passion and desire to save the planet is applaudable, laudable, honorable, and the right, correct thing to be on the side of. You are on the right side of history. Tragically, though, like with all things, you might notice a pattern. Your very effort has been hijacked at the deepest levels and turned into a circus of keeping you busy. Our activism is not, and I quote Lindsay, our activism is not commensurate with the problems that we face today. Our activism is still about pressure politics. It's about trying to influence someone important to do something for us. But it's not about us taking control of our activism ourselves. It is about turning to each other in our communities and say it's that no one else is going to help us. Blah, I butchered that. It has to be about turning to each other in our communities and saying, no one else is going to help us. We have to do this ourselves. By the way, for those of you who don't know who Thomas Lindsay is, he was once a very passionate environmental protection law firm lawyer. A lawyer for a law firm that tried to fight for the cause of environmental protection. And that during his work he realized just how cleverly and surreptitiously and Machiavellian, crazy level of anticipating the efforts of anyone trying to make any effort to prevent mega corporations from destroying nature herself. They've already are leaps and bounds ahead of us. How? They've already jerry-rigged the system itself. Thomas Lindsay, I continue with reading different memes that I made from him from this documentary. This documentary is worth watching. It was playing on Link TV. I'm sure it's probably findable on the internet. And if not, then let's go pester Link TV to put it on YouTube or something. And I quote Thomas Lindsay, "Everything has to be rooted out. Something has to be built anew here in the United States. And the only thing stopping that from happening is our own brains. We are convinced that we can't." And I'm going to interject here. Who have we been convinced by? Think about every assumption you've ever made about how that's not possible because it's just human nature. Where the fuck does that rationale come from? War is just human nature. Greed is just human nature. The business tactic of destroying nature is just human nature. It's unavoidable. It's unpreventable. Where does this defeatism come from? Give you a wild guess. Oh, maybe it's the very same corporate groups of brainwashed people that are trying to achieve those things that we think are unavoidable and just a horrible shame. There's nothing we can do about them. I return to Thomas Lindsay's quote. "Corporations have concocted these legal doctrines over the past 200 years so that we have to run up against them. The problem is not just the corporations. The problem is our own government. The problem is our own state and the apparatus of law that has been put into place." Why does he say 200 years? Because America is barely approaching its 200 and almost 300th year, birthday. And these laws are that old. These, something to think about. If you didn't realize, the original 13 colonies, if you look at their documentation from way back in the era, were originated and started and founded as corporations. Corporations owned and subsidized by other corporations. When we had the revolution, we created the myth. When America had the revolution, we created the myth that we overthrew this empirical, tyrannical rule from England. But all we really did was replace one abusive oppressor with another one. And that's because our founding fathers, were just like the kings and queens that originally owned these corporate entities we called the 13 colonies. They were just humans. Kings and queens, CEOs, and chief executive officers, those are the same thing. CEOs and CFOs, presidents and vice presidents, they're just people, folks. All right. Well, I went on a tangent there, but these are some old-ass memes that I haven't posted in a really long time. And the fact that this guy makes these points is quite palpable. It's painful to go through these realizations, but they're true. This guy's documentary is really great, and he speaks a lot at great length and great detail about the way in which these mega corporations are already prepared to take the fight to take on whatever fight anybody brings to them. Why? Because this mentality of corporatism is not something new. This mentality of corporatism has been at the root of what the Constitution's really about, and what keeps the voting patriots, that's horrible, #patriots, what keeps us as a society sedated is this part of us, anyways, many of us, is this idea that the Constitution is out there looking out for us, the people. And yes, it opens with "we, the people," blah, 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 certain unalienable rights. But it immediately, that very sentence proves itself a hypocrisy, right? When you read the document in its original unaltered form, it quickly omits women as people and categorizes all brown and black skin individuals as not people at all, slaves, and only valuable to their owners as percentage points of quote-unquote legal people for their voting rights. Of the owner, not the individual slave. And, as Lindsay states, it puts the rights of property. That's what commercialism is about. That's what consumerism, free market, economic oligarchy is all about. Property and the ability to commodify that property is more important, legally speaking, to the Constitution than the natural-born rights of anybody as a human individual. Or, even more radically, the rights of nature herself. And that's where we get to the part that's really interesting and important, profoundly important in terms of how to solve this problem. We will never solve the problems that we face in the United States or just about any other postmodern, supposedly democratic, civil society of laws, because the entirety of the process has been for a long time subversively about keeping the voters docile and participating in the made-up sociopathic economy that's a lie. And here's the original meme I was getting to at the very, 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 very beginning of my Instagram account. There's a theme going on in my memes, and I think it's most directly expressed with this one. You are inseparable from the world and the universe, like a leaf is an inseparable aspect of a tree. Why is that important? Because that helps to wrap our brains, our little puny ego minds, around the sentence, Earth is not a place. While you appear to be independent of it, you are not. Try to exist without Earth. Try to. Take a moment and realize that you cannot live without Earth. And that although you can pick your feet up and walk around and stuff, you are intrinsically interconnected with it and everything else here. Now you can concede that and still say, well, it's still a place, until you realize a little bit deeper why, or what is meant by fractal recursion or fractalism. And that's that this inseparability from this place, this not place that we foolishly call a place, is not just a theoretical proposition. It's an aspect of the fractal nature of this infinite cosmos. We are not separate from Earth. Earth is not separate from its context, right? That's why right below that meme where I say you are inseparable from the universe, like a leaf is inseparable from a tree, almost immediately beneath it I have a meme that's my reconstruction of an old school social meme that was floating around in the 50s and 60s in the form of T-shirts and posters, which should not be unknown to people. I was trying to recreate it because I could not find an awesome image of it in its original form and font. But it says, "We are here," or "You are here," because there were two variants. I like the "We are here" better, and that's the one I recreated. And it points to an outer arm of an artistic rendering, if I'm not mistaken, of a galaxy very much like our own, the Milky Way. Okay? Right next to those two memes is another one, the Earth. And I got a lot of flack from flat earthers originally because they thought that somehow this image was meant to prove something. And I know the image is just a doodle. I borrowed the image from the internet. It's not a real picture of Earth. That's got nothing to do with the point of the message of the meme. The Earth is not just our only home. Okay? The Earth is not just our only home. It is a living system of self-correcting systems. We are inseparable in terms of our survivability from this system. Yes, in theory, we can go to another planet. But think about this fact. To go there, we have to bring with us a bubble of this planet. And then get to that other planet and do radical, invoke radical change on that planet. And I'm not judging that morally. I'm saying let's not be so stupid as to ignore the implications of that. Everyone knows the sci-fi trope of getting, shot into space and dying or being frozen, etc. Many heroes, many villains from sci-fi literature have had this threat or reality, occur to them. But the significance about the depth of this interoperability is deep and profound. And it resonates in another meme that I shared very, very early on in my meme making. We blame society, and yet we are society. If there's something wrong with Mother Earth, we cannot separate ourselves from that wrongness. Okay? And let's be really, really honest and frank. The Matrix and Mr. Agent Smith, Agent Smith, right? Was pretty bang on when he gave that monologue at Neo, who was, handcuffed to a chair with electrodes in that one torture chamber office-y thing in that building before the helicopter, action sequence, that we have become a cancer here. Look at everything that we do. Look at everything that we do and look at everything that we argue about. All right? And then let's get back to this argument, this brainwashing, this lie, that all the best we can do is throw up our hands and go, "Oh, woe is me, what a shame." There's nothing to do. All right? Or if that's one option, or the other option is go kill a bunch of people and start over. There's an original meme that I made quite a while back that's floating right in there in that confluence of things that I was referencing. Let us all remember, this is not a war, nor are we fighting a good fight. Abandon such concepts and let go of such words. Enlightenment, which I should have capitalized there, enlightenment needs not soldiers, for it is not an army. Enlightenment needs lovers, for it is love. "15 minutes left," or in my default 45-minute broadcast time. No one's joining me live in the chat room. What a sadness. It's noon p.m., the 6th day of the 8th month of the 2017th year of our Lord Jesus Christ, or the first year of Trumptopia, whichever you prefer. both of which are kind of riddled with hypocrisy and nonsense. My friends, we do not need to live like this. Another deeply original meme. This was an original meme that I made. I co-opted the image and was inspired by it. Someone, a while back, made an image that by itself was floating around and becoming very memeified. And that's, someone sort of made a graffiti art stencil cutout spray paint graphic of a needle on a fuel gauge. And at the full end was a gas pump representing not only our cars, our toxic addiction to driving and, transporting things in the most self-destructive, format possible, which is, encased or, represented by the entire oil industry. And at the other end, as the needle, and everyone will recognize this sort of version of the gas tank. It's the kind that's, at a 45-degree angle, and the arc, goes from full tank to the other end is empty. Well, at the other end of this arc, representing empty, is war, sprayed in red paint. My friends, as I stated in this meme, which I believe I originally posted on June 7th, 2014, and that I've been feeling this way for as long as I've been a radical activist against all political ideology. And that's it. We do not need to live like this, my friends. We do not need to be debt slaves for this corporately corrupt, pretense at democratic organization. But we have allowed ourselves to succumb to the brainwashing that this is the best. This is the best we can do. And that all the corruption and the greed and the clusterfuck of fail involved in this system and the toxicity and self-destructive nature of it is just human nature playing itself out. And there's really no way to... Fuck that noise, folks. Fuck that noise. And let me tell you something. The urgency here is not just one of some sort of moral self-righteousness. I am opposed to moral ideology as much as I am corporate ideology, as much as I am opposed to statist ideology. Those of you who know me, there's a meme. All of those things are ideology, statism, religiousism, all of these things are ideological constructs. All ideology is mind control. The only solution to it, then, by the most strictest of logical standards, requires the individual and the group self-liberation from the modus operandi of all the mind control. Guess what, my friends? That not only is what Mother Nature knows is what is best for us, but thankfully is already, out there to give us the means by which to give it, to achieve it, rather. Let's be frank. The reason we've got backlash against hippie New Age thinking is because there's horrible examples of corporate spiritualism being peddled. And ironically, those are the ones that do the best. Because we're already well trained, whether we're spiritual people or not, whether we're becoming spiritual people or not. We're already spent all of our youth, before we understood anything, being corporately indoctrinated to rely on the system as it is and want to buy stuff. Now, like I said, I'm not trying to build a moral structure around that. I'm trying to point out to you, anyone listening who loves to buy stuff still, that buying stuff has nothing to do with nature. The real process of what is organically around us, that we are inseparable from, but that we keep building blockades around us. Someone recently posted that we cannot live in a box. Kudos to you, my Facebook friend, for posting that. Because that's exactly what society does to us, both physically, on a bunch of different levels. We wake up in a box, inside a box, to get into another box, to bathe, and then we walk out of that complex of boxes that we call a house to get into another box we call a car. And we burn toxic fuel that we destroyed part of our mother, who's not a place, but a womb, a living womb that sustains us, that we had to, to pull that sludge out of her is toxic in and of itself. But then what do we do with the sludge once we pull it out of her? Which, who knows, we don't even bother to understand what is the natural order of things and why is that sludge buried deep in the earth and what is being achieved by it being in the earth. There must be some real reason why that's occurring, and it isn't, I don't think, there for us to pull out and then spray all over things and, wrap everything in plastic and turn it into toxic waste that gets burned, which creates more toxic waste as it is burned, so we can move around the things that we've covered in plastic and then profiteer on each other using and buying and selling these things that we've covered in plastic. Because we can make each other food and share the food. We can make each other objects of entertainment and share the objects of entertainment without any of the toxic bullshit. The only reason that toxic bullshit is the system that we are dependent on is because those with all the money that own all the stuff and control all the indoctrination mechanisms have indoctrinated us into thinking this is inevitably the best way to do it. And it's not. It's the most highly toxic and self-destructive way to do it. And if we don't radically change the way we do things, from soup to nuts, mind you, from the way we bury our dead to the way we produce our food for each other to the way we, even to the way, God bless it, we celebrate our connection to spirit, has to radically alter. And where does it begin? I think I saved for future quoting as a meme or, re-memification is the meme that I think it's a quote of Mother Teresa's. If you want to change the world, go home and love your family. But love is not some abstract nonsense notion of a fleeting feeling that is dependent on the other people's, merit or worthiness. That's another one of the crazy lies in this complicated coercion into abandoning love as a frequency and as a spiritual activity that we can engage in at all times and that can literally heal us spiritually, mentally, and bodily, and engage in healing each other spiritually, mentally, and bodily. There's another radical meme that I'm trying to sort of remember where it's at so I can read it at you, that I made very early in my... Here's one. It's not the one I was thinking of, but I'll end the show with this and a little bit of unpacking on it. The system wants us angry. The oppressors wants us to confused and angry and armed to the teeth. And I'm referencing a different quote in preparing to quote you a different quote, a different meme. And it does that through divisive and confusing tactics. So I'm going to close the show on this, my friends. The suppression of transcendental spirituality is the original conspiracy. Not the original conspiracy theory, but the original conspiracy. The original nefarious plot to enslave us and profiteer on us is rooted in the and I'm expanding, I'm unpacking the quote, is rooted in the suppression of transcendental spirituality. Okay? Let me read from the quote some more. Centuries before Muhammad, before Christ or Christos, before Buddha, before Moses, before the pharaohs, before Krishna, profiteers were hijacking the teachings of enlightened ones whose names we have forgotten and corrupting the religions that we've forgotten the names of. Simply put, the profiteers cannot profiteer on humanity if humanity achieves enlightenment. Someone else recently, I saw this today in preparation for the show, and I think I might have saved it. I meant to respond to it, but then I didn't because I didn't want to take up too much time in between segments. Because the whole point of this, 420 seconds left. The whole point of today is to do it live. And the whole point of Sundays is to do all the segments live. So I think Sundays is when I'm going to do the long, drawn-out version of each segment. So I digress a bit, right? So in my break in between segments, today I saw someone post, how long ago did we fall to the complicity of something, of the system, of the corporate system, of the state system? I don't remember the wording, and forgive me, friend, for butchering your quote. But my response was, a long, long time ago, longer than we realize. I may not gotten around to actually writing out the response, but that is my reaction to you, dear friend. And you'll hopefully, if you ever do come around to listening to my podcast, will have a moment and go, that was mine, yay. I doubt you're listening live because no one seems to be. At least I can't tell from the Sprecher platform. No one's in the chat room saying anything, but that's fine. The first Sunday officially that I, previously had promoted as I'm going to be on the air live all Sunday. So, we're going to talk about this very notion in depth in future episodes. But you'll see that it connects to everything. Enlightenment can be described as the liberation of one's true self from one's mind. And I opened the show with the statement, it's all in your mind, so change your mind. Our mind is an emergent and convergent phenomena. It is partly, in the part that we call ego mind, and all of its facets, is an emergent phenomena that indeed is expressed or made manifest by the body avatar. But there are other components involved, and these are the components that we've been lied to about for so long that we really can't pinpoint the origin. We can just continue to trace how far back it is included in the indoctrination. This original lie is the separation of man from divinity, the idea that God is out there somewhere and is ready to judge us and punish us. No, my friends, God is not some individuated self out there somewhere, either torturing us or controlling us or observing us or judging us. Well, actually, he's not observing us from the outside in, like a person watching an ant farm or a fish tank. That is incorrect. That is the incorrect, very highly misleading, divisive division. And you can always tell when it is false. When a statement about divinity is false, you know it is false because it inherently, by nature, causes division amongst us as individuals and between us and that which is divine. Because the truth about divinity, my friends, I'm here to remind you, as many before me have been here to remind you, as many after me will come around, be here to remind you, is that divinity itself cannot be separated from the phenomena you are living through. I hope that you find the time, that you make the time in your daily life to go and meditate, to experience that truth for yourself. Not because I encourage you to, not because I said so, but because it is organically and inherently your birthright. Om Shanti, Metta Shanti, Om Namaste. Thank you for tuning in. And if you're out there kind of low-key encouraging the show and sharing it around everyone, so thank you. If you want to be on the show, hit me up. That's what the email address is for. Also, by the way, those who have hit me up and we're just having the normal round of logistical discussions, because there have been a few. I just haven't, struck final agreements and final schedule stuff. Thank you, and we'll come to interviewing you on the show.